Today, there are 2 million descendants of French-Canadian immigrants living in New England. These are our stories. Welcome to the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Venez tous jeunes filles et garçons, je vais vous raconter l'histoire de notre immigration ici au USA, de grands aventuriers de pays étrangers.
This is the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast. I am Jesse Martineau. This week's episode is a really big episode for the podcast, as this week's guest is someone that will be very well known to many of the listeners of the podcast. Dr. Leslie Choquette is the director of the French Institute at Assumption University in Worcester, Massachusetts. She's also a professor of history and French studies, where classes she teaches include North American Indians and the history of Canada, which is pretty neat. Dr. Choquette holds a PhD in history from Harvard University, and she has written numerous publications, including one with a very fun title, Frenchmen into Peasants, Modernity and Tradition, the Peopling of French Canada. And she was also one of the people behind the amazing symposium at Yale in March, titled The Potential and Future of French North American Studies. Leslie, welcome to the French Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Thanks so much, Jesse.
Now, before we get going talking about some of these things I mentioned in the introduction, I would love to get your story. If you could just kind of let us know kind of where you're from and how you ended up in this kind of crazy world of Franco studies.
Well, I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts, South Attleboro, which is basically a suburb of Central Falls, Rhode Island. My father is half French Canadian, half Polish.
Gotcha.
So that's where the French Canadian ancestry came through. How I got involved, however, with the Franco world is a very kind of convoluted way. I went to school in Providence, Rhode Island, and I had a bunch of fantastic French teachers, but they were all from Europe. So they turned me into they taught me the language and they turned me into a real Francophile, but all I knew about was French culture, French literature, French history.
Sure.
And so it wasn't until I was in college studying French history, I was studying like the social and economic history of France in the 17th and 18th century. My parents asked me since I knew French, if I could put together a little tourist itinerary for us to visit Quebec in the summer. And so I started to do that. And in the process of doing that, it occurred to me, all these people got here.
Yeah.
From
Sure.
the France that I'm studying.
For sure.
Maybe it would be interesting to find out something about who these people were and why they crossed the ocean. And so that's what started it. And as a result of that, I started going up to Quebec to do research, and the Quebec historians and archivists just welcomed me with open arms and, took me under their wing.
And that's super interesting because it's very different than the way I think a lot of us end up pursuing, studying the Franco-American story, telling the Franco-American story. So did your dad, did he speak French at all? Did he have part of any organizations that were involved in telling the Franco story?
My father's French consisted of foods that he liked and bad words.
The most important things. Yeah, I got you.
My grandfather, who was born in 1905 in Woonsocket, French was his first language. But he lost his mother in the flu epidemic
of
1918. But I think he was taken in by Francophone relatives, but then he never used it after being a teenager, basically. And my father remembered taking a trip up to Quebec with his father after World War II. My grandfather loved to drive. He was a city bus driver.
Oh, cool.
And my father said that he was surprised that my grandfather had some difficulty communicating because his French had become very, very rusty.
Sure. No, I can understand that. That's kind of
So
similar things. Yeah.
it's actually my great grandfather who came down from
Oh,
Quebec
wow. So
about
family's been around a long time here.
about 1870. So yeah, that makes me, I guess, the fifth generation to be here in the US.
That's wild. That's interesting. So was there any kind of recognizable Franco even community in the town you were growing up in? Was this something that was on your radar at
Um,
all? That
it
this even existed, you know?
So my neighborhood was very mixed ethnically. There were some WASP folks who had come down, I think, basically from Nova Scotia about the same time that the French Canadians were coming down. There were French Canadians. There were also Poles. There were also Irish.
Interesting. And how did the kind of transition happen? I always find this fascinating. People who can really focus their professional careers on anything, but to choose to tell our story, which I think is amazing. How did this become kind of going from the experiences you had in Quebec to I think I'm going to do this for a living. This is the space I'm going to work in.
Well, this is also a funny story. A lot of it has to do with ending up at Assumption.
Sure.
Which of course was founded as a Franco-American college in those prep school and college in those days just for men. The reason that they ended up at Assumption because they had advertised by mistake just for a sabbatical fill-in, like for a one-year job. And I did not actually need a one-year job because I was able to stick around after I finished for a couple of years as a lecturer. So normally I would not have applied for a one-year job, but I did because I had heard of Assumption as this weird little French place.
That's awesome.
And the reason I had heard of it as this weird little French place, I had gone up to Lowell. This is about when I was finishing up my PhD. They were having a celebration of Jack Kerouac. And so I had signed up for a bus tour with two wonderful Francos from Lowell who are sadly now deceased, Roger Brunel, who was a major Kerouac specialist. He taught French in the high schools there, but he was one of the top specialists in Kerouac, and his friend, Reginald Ouellet. And so the two of them had rented an old yellow school bus.
Nice.
And all of these folks had come in from Cambridge and Newton and stuff. And they get in the yellow school bus and we're kind of going from three-decker to three-decker
Sure.
to church to church. And at some point, Roger said, well, I'm going to read you some stuff that Jack wrote in the French Canadian dialect just so that you can hear it. I forget what it was that he read, but it was funny, and I laughed. And I could see them like, ha ha. How come one of these people from like Newton or Cambridge or Brookline is actually understanding the Franco-American dialect and laughing?
Sure. No, that's awesome.
And so afterwards, they came up and talked to me. They were thrilled to hear I was writing this dissertation on, the peopling of French Canada. They gave me a private tour and they sent me home with Jerry Brault's book about Franco-Americans. Jerry Brault had attended Assumption, and he has quite an interesting and detailed chapter about his experience at Assumption in that book.
Cool.
So, a year later, this one-year job comes up, and I'm like, hey, that's that weird little French school. So I applied just kind of for fun. And the day after they got my application, the chair of the department called me and he said, so actually they screwed up and there's two jobs. One of them is a 1-year replacement job. The other one is a tenure track job. Which one would you like to be
Yeah,
considered?
I'm not sure that's a tough choice. Yeah.
But because of the French Institute, which was founded by my late colleague Claire Cantal, as
Sure.
soon as I got to Assumption, I was just integrated into that world. Claire actually was the one who connected me with Denis Vaugeois, is the founder of the Septentrion Publishing House on Quebec history. And so he's the one who arranged to publish my book in French.
Very cool.
Without Claire, that wouldn't have happened.
That is a wild story.
It's all thanks to Jack.
That is very, very, very cool. I did want to ask about the fact that you guys have a history of Canada class, though, because that's certainly not something that was offered at the George Washington University during my undergraduate days. And I'm just curious. Sorry, go ahead.
It wasn't offered at Harvard, and I was there for 15 years. They didn't have a single history of Canada class. So it was created by my late colleague and mentor, Raymond Marion, Franco from Gardner, Mass. He said that he basically created it in response to student demand, I believe in the 1970s. And he said that basically the civil rights movement had sparked kind of ethnic revivals,
Sure,
including among Francos. And so his students were like, hey, if there can be African American history, why can't we have our history? And that's how he created that course.
that is very, very cool. And I'm just curious about some of the students you work with. They have any kind of working knowledge at all about Canadian history prior to taking the class? Because I'm guessing most of my friends would not have when we started
Most
college.
most of them do not. Most of them have an interest that is somehow personal.
Sure,
I taught the course, was it last year or the year before last? And one of my best students was a student whose last name was Surette, nice Acadian name.
sure.
And his family had come from Southwest Nova Scotia, which has a very Franco area, very Acadian area. And they had come in the early 20th century, ended up in Cambridge, in North Cambridge, which had an Acadian parish, Notre-Dame de la Pitié. So he, although he was third generation, didn't know French, is still very connected to the area and has in fact bought back the land from his family's farm
That's incredible.
and
That's so
intends
cool.
to put a cabin on it. So the connection was super strong.
Sure. That is very, very, very cool. That's, I mean, sorry. You just got me thinking of daydreaming here of things that I could do if I had that opportunity. That's just be so neat to be able to do
And
that.
I had the students as part of the class toward the end of the semester. I put them in pairs and had them do a group presentation on any topic that they wanted. And Christian actually teamed up with a Haitian student, and they both talked about their family's migration stories, which
Oh,
was
that's fun.
very cool. Yeah.
See, that's really, really neat. I do want to talk also, because I'm curious about the Frenchmen into Peasants. What what was this? I guess a
Okay.
dissertation slash book
Yes.
about?
So it is about the peopling of French Canada, the original, settlers,
Sure.
colonists from France. So there's a famous book in French history which is called Peasants into Frenchmen. And it's basically about how the French Republic at the end of the 19th century and in the early 20th century took peasants from isolated parts of France and through the school system and through military service, taught them standard French and gave them a sense of belonging to a modern French nation. When I started to do the work on the original colonists of Canada, I had expected, because Quebec was so rural for so long, and very conservative, very Catholic for a very long time. I just assumed that it would be the old peasant France that had produced the settlers, and I found out that that wasn't the case at all. That they were majority from cities, in fact, from big cities, a lot from Paris, and then the various seaports on the western coast. And even the rural people were in areas that were well connected to city markets. So it was kind of from the most modern part of French economy and French society. And many people with urban backgrounds, including my own Choquette ancestor, ended up becoming farmers in Canada because,
Sure.
what else were you going to do? But it was the kind of the opposite process. So I took the title of that famous book, and I inverted it.
That is very, very cool. You're absolutely, I mean, I just always assumed that because my ancestors, I could trace them all the way back to the guy who came over from France, and every census possible from, my grandfather back, they're always just listed as farmers. So I assume
Right.
that's probably what they must have done when they came over from France. But evidently, that's not necessarily the case.
I'll have to actually look up your family, and I'll let you know. And it's not that a lot of them didn't come from the countryside, but this is a time when I think 15% of Frenchmen lived in towns, and only a fraction of that lived in big cities. Urban people were like 3 times more numerous among the
Gotcha.
immigrants to Canada than they were in France.
Do want to ask quickly about the symposium at Yale, the potential and future of French North American studies. It was an incredible weekend. Seriously, one of the most amazing weekends I've had. One of the coolest things that's happened to me as a result of first starting this podcast. Where did that idea come from to put together a symposium down at Yale?
Jay Gitlin has been a friend of mine since I read his book, which is about the French presence in what is now the American Midwest. And so we have been doing stuff together for a while, and he has had always a strong interest in the French in North America because of his work. We had most recently collaborated on an article that we are still looking to publish. We have a draft of it written, and it's called Trader Vic and Trader Joe, French Canadians, Otherness, and the Taste for Difference. Trader Vic is not so well known today. He was basically the inventor of the modern tiki bar
Oh,
and tiki
wow.
restaurant.
Very cool.
And Trader Joe, when he created his grocery store chain, kind of consciously emulated Trader Vic with the kind of the South Seas motif. The original people who worked for Trader Joe's always had to wear Hawaiian shirts and stuff. And it turns out that both of these guys had French, they were born in California, both of them, but in French Canadian families, with a history of migrating all over creation, all over the North American continent. So we put together this thing sort of connecting their history as footloose French Canadians to their interest in, exoticism, and using that as a marketing technique. And so that was what we had collaborated on most recently. And so Jay said, hey, it'd be really cool if we put together a conference on Franco-Americans. So that's what we did.
And it was an amazing collection of people that we got to listen to. Super, super smart. Super, super interesting. And then, of course, in the evening, we went out and had ourselves a pretty good time on
We
that
did.
campus, which is again just makes everything kind of worth it when you get together with people who share kind of the same passion you do and go out and have fun.
Absolutely.
That was just a blast. I'm hoping one day that there's a round two
I
of
hope so
this.
too.
The French Institute, saving the kind of the main event for
Yes.
last. The French Institute. So before we get talking too much specific, I guess, big picture, for those of you who may not know, what is the French Institute at Assumption University?
So the French Institute was founded by my late colleague Claire Cantal, and one of the Assumptionists, the late Father Wilfred Dufault, who was a Franco from Spencer, Claire, a Franco from Central Falls, Rhode Island, right near where I was from. They created it because Assumption is now an English language university. They wanted to preserve the memory of what it had been when it was originally French only, and then became bilingual for several decades. So certainly bilingual. It made the transition to English only after World War II. The point of the French Institute is to be a research center, basically, with resources on our umbrella mission is the French in North America, but our specific mission is the French Canadian migration into New England, since we're right at the center of that. And Assumption was created to serve the people from that diaspora.
Sure. And can you tell us about some of the collections you guys have? Because just even going through your website, you guys have a ton.
We have some amazing stuff, and the more stuff we put on the web, the more stuff we get.
That's cool.
So anybody out there that, has old family stuff in French, don't throw it out. Call us up.
For sure.
It's a small but very cool collection that we received this year. Was from a gentleman in San Francisco named Lionel Biron. And he is a photographer by trade, but his father grew up in the Franco community, I forget where in Mass, but in Mass, and attended Assumption. And he has all starting with Assumption Prep, so starting when he was just a young teen. And he has hundreds of letters that his father wrote in French to his mom when he was a student
Oh,
at
that's
Assumption
cool.
Prep and Assumption. There are also two narratives written by his grandmother who was a girl when the family migrated from southern Quebec to Massachusetts, or New Hampshire, actually. I think they went to Manchester, come to
There you
think.
go. Love it.
But writing about the circumstances that led her family to make the decision that they had to come down, what it was like for her as a young woman to come down. So just really fantastic stuff.
That is incredible. And you talk about the things that you wish you have in your family. To be able to have somebody who saved these
Yes.
is absolutely amazing. How do people go through the process of kind of searching what you guys have and being able to preview what it is they might be able to get their hands on at the French Institute?
So if you Google French Institute Assumption, our website will pop up. You can, with a couple of clicks of the mouse, you can get to our archival collections. They're in several categories. Some pertain to individuals. For instance, we have an interesting collection, which is being partly digitized right now, about Félix Gatineau, who was a Franco in Southbridge, Massachusetts, came down at the age of 19 without a penny to his name, but able to minimally read and write, which was a big asset for him. Started work in a factory in Southbridge, but within a year or two had graduated to being a clerk in a grocery store, went on to own his own grocery store, then ended up going to work for the Union Saint-Jean-Baptiste, the
Oh, cool.
USJB, big mutual aid society. He ended up becoming the president. He also ended up being elected to the Massachusetts legislature representing Southbridge.
That's awesome.
And so we've got fantastic stuff that he collected, including before he became the president of the USJB, he was in charge of something that was called the Caisse des Vieillards, which was basically the fund that they had created to take care of elderly members who needed financial help. This is before Social Security.
Sure.
So your ethnic
Right.
group had to help you with Social Security. So whenever he would get a request from a family, he would make a personal visit to their home and he would write up a report
Oh, wow.
about their economic circumstances. Really, really rich stuff. And we're having that digitized right now.
Incredibly valuable to a researcher to be able to have those observations. That's amazing.
So we have collections by individuals, often, prominent people like Gatineau. We also have a collection of Dr. S.A. Daudelin, who is a very prominent doctor in Worcester, and who also was involved in politics. He represented the United States at the International Maritime Exposition in Bordeaux in the early 1900s. I think it was in 1908, something like that. Prominent individuals. We also have a lot of family collections, like the one I just mentioned that was given to us, the materials given to us by about the Buron family. I have a big family collection pertaining to the Jobin family. This was a family of 9 children. They came down in 1890. They went from Quebec City to Boston, which is not the usual
For
trajectory,
sure. Yeah.
but they had owned a retail store in Quebec City that they sold in order to come down because the father found out that he had tuberculosis.
Oh, wow.
And so he knew he was not going to live long enough to see his children grow up. And he thought that they would probably have a better chance making it economically without him in the States.
Oh, wow.
So they went to Boston. The father was got a job as an accountant at a department store. The 2 oldest sons got jobs also in Boston department stores. One of them went on to become a commercial artist, and one of his specialties was doing department store window displays. Anyway, there were 9 kids. 2 of the girls ended up marrying Franco-Americans, but moving back to Montreal. And so there is correspondence between the Boston family and the family in Quebec that go from 1890, when Dad and the 2 oldest sons go down first and get jobs, and then write and ask for the others to come down, from 1890 until about 1980.
Oh, wow.
Hundreds and hundreds of letters.
That's cool.
Yeah. And the artwork of the son who became an artist. One of the sons became a bookstore owner. And he collected, as a bookstore owner, he collected books of interest to himself. on, it so happens, the French in North America.
Of course, sure.
And we have that collection, wonderful stuff. So individuals, families, we also have scholar collections. So one of our most recently processed collections is the papers of Armand Chartier, now retired and emeritus professor of French from University of Rhode Island, Franco-American activist, specialist, kind of one of the creators with Claire Pintal of Franco-American Studies and Paul Chassé at Rhode Island College. That collection is, I should have had my notes in front of me, but linear feet-wise, it's really long. It takes up a big, long shelf in our archives.
Sure. But that, I mean, it's huge that that is being archived, though. I mean, that is a
Yes.
very important name for a lot of us who try to work in this space. So to be able to have his collections is
And
hugely important.
now that it's processed, although none of his stuff yet is digitized, what you can do is you can go to the website, you can click on the PDF for the finding aid, which is really, really long. But you can go through and look at what's there.
That's awesome. And
Uh,
I did notice also you guys have not just traditional documents, but it looks like you have some videos, you have some vinyl. I saw maybe some episodes of Bonjour, which is produced right here in my hometown of Manchester, which I think is
yup.
very neat.
We have a not quite but almost complete collection of Bonjour,
That's awesome.
which is in the process of being digitized. So that should be available probably definitely in the next year. All of the Bonjour episodes that we've been able to find.
Very cool. Because I would imagine for most people, they would only exist like on a cassette tape, if they exist at all still. So to be able to have them digitized, that's kind of neat.
I think it was actually VHS.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's what I meant. Like a
Yeah.
VHS tape. You're right. That's one of those old. I'm plenty old enough to remember having a VCR with the old separate machine that did the rewinding for you. I had one of those too.
Exactly.
But that's cool. Yeah, so you guys have a whole bunch of just
And then
super interesting things.
the last category of archives that we have is Franco organizations. And
Oh, neat.
and we have the archives of the two big mutual aid societies, the USJB, that
Mhm.
is an incredible collection. A lot of printed stuff too, because they acquired a major Franco-American library. And so that's part of their collection. And also the Association Canado-Américaine from
Absolutely.
Manchester. So when that closed, the last CEO, Pauline Lally, gave us the archives. So the minutes of the board meetings
Oh,
from
wow.
1896
That's so cool.
until the 21st century. Yeah.
That's just amazing that that still exists, that we can still get our hands on that and see that material. I mean, for the ACA, obviously we still have the building here in Manchester, and I know my grandmother worked for them for a bit, just kind of like reception, but
Mhm.
just having the title of working for the ACA, it was like a social boost
Oh, oh,
just immediately,
absolutely.
just to say that it didn't
Yep.
matter what job you had, just to say that you did have a job there automatically
Yes.
put you up that social ladder a little bit in the eyes of
The
the other.
elite, the Franco
Yes,
elite. Yep.
that is so cool. That is very, very neat. Well, this has been an absolute blast and a privilege, and it has flown by. But I do, if it's cool, want to ask one more question. Not a super straightforward one. It's complicated, but it's one I think about all the time. And because you work with and around college students all the time, I did want to take the opportunity to ask, what can we do to get college students more excited, more interested, more invested in French and in a lot of cases, their Franco-American culture.
It's a hard one.
It is,
Um,
yeah.
One thing that Kate Bradley, our wonderful French Institute archivist, and I have been doing, partnering with as many undergraduate classes as we can, if we can find any kind of reasonable connection. So we met with all of the sections of this year's history course on American immigration.
Sure.
And we bring them to the French Institute and we just sort of give them some hands-on experience with some of these cool things that we have, just to try and kind of spark some excitement about it. We also partnered with 3 different French courses this year, the same thing. So not just make it something that's about a very far away place, but you can see that it connects to something here in Worcester and
For
here at
sure.
Assumption.
That's
that
awesome.
this is part of our history. So collaborations with undergraduate classes, just kind of like the History of Canada class, just teaching that history,
For sure.
and giving students, Christian Surratt, whom I had that time, just giving him the opportunity to learn more
Right.
about
No, that's
now
awesome.
he already had a strong connection, but I think it was a big deal for him that he was able to pursue that in a class.
That is very, very cool. This has been a very, very fun conversation. We've been talking with Dr. Leslie Choquette, the director of the French Institute at Assumption University. Leslie, thank you for talking with us.
Thank you, Jesse. It's been fun.
Now our fathers look at us and sigh with despair, to think that everything they love we simply do not share. But the spirit never dies, our culture will survive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive.
Special thanks to Josie Vachon for providing the music. You can find more about her at josievachon.com. This podcast was produced and edited by Mike Campbell. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at fclpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at FCL Podcast for more information about the topics discussed. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this episode.